What can the United States actually do in Greenland right now without buying it or changing the legal framework? With recent headlines about American interest in Greenland, most people assume the US would need to purchase the territory or negotiate completely new agreements to expand operations there. But here's what almost everyone is overlooking. There's already a legal framework in place that grants the United States significant operational capabilities in Greenland, a framework that's been active since 1951. However, the specifics of what the US can and cannot do under these agreements remain largely misunderstood even by policy experts. In this video, I'll break down the actual legal documents, that is the 1951 Defense Agreement and its 2004 amendments. This will show you exactly what operational freedoms the United States already has in Greenland. I'm Stephen Højlund, a social science researcher at the Danish Stream Media Group. Let's have a look at the Defense Agreement. The 1951 Defense Agreement between the United States and Denmark was born from the Cold War necessity. It was specifically designed to facilitate NATO cooperation against Soviet threats in the Arctic region. But here's what makes this agreement fascinating. It has continuously evolved, reflecting Greenland's changing political status. In 1953, Greenland abandoned its colonial status and became an equal part of Denmark under the Danish constitution, actually a Danish sort of region. By 1979, it gained its own home rule government. This change was reflected in the Defense Agreement with the amendment from 2004, a comprehensive amendment modernizing the entire framework to acknowledge Greenland's semi-autonomous status. This evolution is critical because it means the agreement isn't some dusty Cold War relic that is not in fact used. It is very much alive. So let's have a look at what the US actually operates on Greenland today. The answer might surprise you a little bit. It's actually just one primary military installation. It's the Pituffik Space Base, formerly known as the Thule Air Base, located in the northwest of Greenland. US having only one base left on Greenland represents a dramatic reduction from the Cold War era, where the US operated a broader network of military facilities across Greenland, predominantly radar stations. The 2004 agreement made this crystal clear with one sentence: Thule Pituffik Air Base is the only defense area in Greenland. But here's the interesting part about this. Pituffik isn't just another airbase. Its functions is an epicenter for missile warning and space surveillance that protects both the Arctic region and the entire North American continent. This makes it one of the most strategically vital US installations in the Arctic, especially for a Golden Dome project, as Greenland serves as the early warning outpost for Russian-launched missiles in particular. But if we zoom out a little bit and look at Greenland overall, what can US actually do under the current agreement? The operational authorities that the US has are more extensive than most people realize. Within designated defense areas, the United States military can freely use and move between facilities without paying compensation to Denmark. They can construct and improve infrastructure, including harbors, channels, air bases, and so on and so forth. They maintain free accesses and movement through Greenland by land, air, and sea, including territorial waters. But here's the most significant operational freedom. US aircrafts may fly over and land in any territory in Greenland, including territorial waters, without restrictions. US public vessels and armed forces also enjoy freedom from compulsory pilotage and harbor dues. These aren't minor privileges. These are actually substantial operational capabilities that enable the US to maintain Arctic readiness and surveillance without constant having to negotiate any bureaucratic obstacles with Denmark. So, does this mean that the US operates unilaterally in Greenland? Not at all. The 1951 agreement establishes what I call a consultation framework rather than unilateral American authority. Danish military personnel are attached to the staff of US commanding officers, specifically under one officer with whom the American commander must consult on all important local matters affecting Danish interests. Think of it as a built-in check on American operations. 2004 amendments strengthened the local voice even further. Greenland's home rule government gained the right to appoint its own representative to liaise directly with the Pituffik commander on local issues. This means Greenland now has a direct input into operations, not just through Denmark. When or if disputes arise, whether about land use, environmental impacts, or operational concerns, all sides are expected to resolve matters in a friendly manner and through the established channels. If initial resolution fails, issues escalate to a permanent committee or even to the diplomatic level. This structure reflects a fundamental principle embedded in the agreement. It's a partnership, not a takeover. Now here's where the 2004 amendments introduce something groundbreaking for a military agreement, and that is the environmental protections. The US committed to reducing pollution, protecting nature, and complying with Greenland's strict environmental rules. An environmental subcommittee was established specifically to oversee compliance. Any base modifications must now factor in ecological impacts. Greenland even received access to Pituffik for environmental monitoring purposes. This was probably introduced due to the ecological disasters created when the US left previous bases. Hundreds of thousands of fuel oil barrels are lying around leaking into the fragile Arctic nature, and in one abandoned base, radioactive residue from a nuclear reactor lies under the ice waiting for a disaster to happen. Given the latest debate, it's also worth mentioning that Denmark retains complete sovereignty over all defense areas in Greenland. The 1951 agreement explicitly states the US operations cannot infringe upon Danish sovereignty. The US unambiguously recognizes the sovereignty of the Kingdom of Denmark over Greenland. The 2004 amendment reinforced this by acknowledging Greenland's status as an equal part of the Kingdom of Denmark. This isn't just diplomatic language, it's a legal constraint embedded in the framework. So here's the question everyone wants answered: can the US establish new military bases in Greenland under the current framework? Technically, this is very possible, but practically it has to be approved by the Kingdom of Denmark. The 1951 agreement does permit the United States to establish new defense areas if deemed necessary by NATO, which actually already has sort of happened, right? However, and this is the crucial part, it requires mutual agreement with Denmark. Recent statements from Danish officials make the boundaries crystal clear. Danish Defense Minister Troels Lund Poulsen stated, "We have a clear red line. We will not relinquish sovereignty over parts of the kingdom to anyone," basically. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen similarly emphasized that while all aspects of the relationship are negotiable, we cannot negotiate our sovereignty. So while the legal framework technically permits expansion, we are not talking about relinquishing territory. The current agreement does not permit the US to unilaterally establish additional military bases, acquire territorial jurisdiction, or diminish Danish sovereignty. The framework remains very flexible, though. The agreement can be modified at any time if all parties agree. And Denmark tends to agree when it comes to Denmark's security and the US security as well, because US is the de facto guarantor for Denmark's security. Pleasing US and doing what they want essentially gives Denmark what it wants, namely security. And of course, we have seen some limits to that recently. But nevertheless, that's the relationship. Either nation could negotiate changes or even terminate the entire framework if relations deteriorate. But here's the catch: the agreement remains in effect for the duration of the North Atlantic Treaty itself. As long as NATO exists, this framework continues. So what does all this mean for current discussions about Greenland? The United States already possesses significant operational capabilities and freedom in Greenland through the 1951 agreement and its 2004 amendment. It can practically do what it wants, it just has to ask Denmark first when it comes to new bases. What the US currently has is a strategically very vital base to do space surveillance. It has extensive freedom of movement for military aircraft and vessels, and it has the technical ability to propose new bases. But these capabilities exist within a framework that explicitly protects Danish sovereignty. It also requires consultation with both Danish and Greenlandic authorities, and it mandates environmental responsibility for the US as well. The legal document reveals something important. Expanding American presence in Greenland doesn't require purchasing the territory or tearing up existing agreements. The framework for cooperation already exists. What it requires is mutual agreement, respect for sovereignty, and recognition of Greenland's evolving political status. The 1951 agreement, amended in 2004, represents not a Cold War relic but a living partnership that has adapted across 7 decades. Understanding what the US can already do under existing agreements clarifies what's actually being discussed when headlines talking about expanding American presence in Greenland. It's not about creating something from scratch. And I also don't think that was what Rutte and Trump discussed at Davos. It's actually more about whether to expand within an existing carefully balanced framework that protects both American security interests and Danish Greenlandic sovereignty. And that framework makes one thing abundantly clear. Any expansion requires partnership, not pressure. And I'm perfectly sure that Mark Rutte and the NATO administration knows this very well. If you found this deep dive into the actual legal framework valuable, please subscribe to the channel for more objective analysis of complex political and legal topics. And if you know someone who's been following the Greenland headlines and want to understand what's actually possible under the current law, please share this video with them. The more people who understand this existing framework, the better informed our discussions about Arctic security and sovereignty will be. Thank you for watching.